formal welcome to all the participants. If you remember that as a part of Azaadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, we are organizing an online speech competition, and you have got the link. The topic of today's speech competition is Jallianwala Bagh Massacre, a homicide or genocide. The language of this speech competition is English. You will be allowed 10 minutes initially, but if you want to extend even for a couple of minutes more, you can extend. So we are allowing around 12 minutes for you to present your speech. The judging criteria includes originality, presentation, use of suitable accents, and the relevance to the topic. So you need to figure it out that you have to very much stay relevant with the topic. The person who will be presenting should switch on her mic as well as mm, the camera and then go for the speech. You can read the speech because if you have prepared it somewhere, so you can read it, but it should not be like reading. So we have Ananya, Bhumi, Sanya, and Krishna. So let us start with Bhumi Bhardwaj, who is 20 IBC 00C 006.
Okay, sir. With the sweet smile and sweet chattering of birds, the whole environment wishes you a very sweet good morning. Today, I, Bhumi Bhardwaj, the student of BSc Economics, is going to deliver my speech on the topic Jallianwala Bagh Massacre, a homicide or genocide. And according to my opinion, I think that Jallianwala Bagh Massacre was a genocide. Now, to describe that, how it was a genocide, I will start with a background before this incident. The success of Satyagraha movements in Champara, Kheda, and Ahmedabad gave a boost to the morale of the oppressed Indian. In light of a perceived threat by the growth of Satyagraha and out of the feelings of similar kinds of conspiracies, the British government decided to exert more control over public activities. As a result, they proposed the Rowlatt Act, which was passed in 1919 after its chairman, Sir Sidney Rowlatt. This act gave the government powers to repress the political activities and giving permission to the government to imprison any person living in British India without a trial, and the imprisonment could be up to 2 years. Indian members were completely against this law, but it got passed hurriedly through the Imperial Legislative Council. Gandhiji decided to oppose this unjust law, which he described as symptoms of a deep-seated disease. The remedy he proposed was Rowlatt Satyagraha, and the date first decided was on March 30, 1919, but it was later changed to April 6. On April 6, the whole of India, from one end to other, observed a complete hartal. According to Gandhiji, the hartal was a magnificent success. Gandhiji was arrested on April 9 but was set free. The news of his arrest provoked serious disturbances in Bombay, Ahmedabad, Nadiad, and elsewhere. In the meantime, events were moving fast in Punjab. The Lieutenant Governor of Punjab, Sir Michael Dyer, had already been notorious for his repressive measures. Gandhiji was served with an order not to enter the Punjab. On April 10, Dr. Satyapal and Dr. Kichlu, two popular leaders of the province, were deported from Amritsar. This created great commotion. To control all this, British took various steps, and one was that they fired on peaceful procession in Amritsar. This provoked people to took violence. On April 11, Brigadier-General Dyer took command of the troops in Amritsar, which was quiet for the next 2 days. Next day, that is on the 12th of April, at about 10 a.m., General Dyer, along with a striking force of 125 British and 310 Indian troops, marched through the city. At one place in his route, a big crowd collected, and he had difficulty in dispersing them. Then he actually thought of firing, but desisted from doing so, obviously for the reason that he wanted to wait for the appointed day, that is the next day. The 13th of April was the day of Baisakhi festival. On this auspicious day, the great Guru Gobind Singh Ji had founded the Khalsa, an organization of the pure and faithful dedicated to the service of humanity. On this day, thousands of men, women, and children come to Amritsar from far and wide, take a dip in the tank of nectar, and after having darshan of Har Mandir, return to their homes. The practice of holding a horse fair on the eve of Baisakhi had also come to stay. The Bhag being so near to the Golden Temple and the day of meeting being that of the Baisakhi festival. It was expected that people in a very large number would attend the meeting. The British chose it to be a suitable occasion to take revenge upon the patriotic Punjabis by opening fire on them. The meeting ground was enclosed on all sides by high walls and had one narrow entrance. General Reginald Dyer marched to spot with his troops and machine guns. He saw a vast crowd collected over there. The meeting was going on in a perfectly peaceful and orderly manner. People from the horse fair had also come to the meeting on hearing that a jalsa was being held there. General Dyer had nothing to wait for. Without warning, Dyer ordered firing on an unarmed crowd. The fire continued for 10 to 15 minutes until the bullets was exhausted. At least 2,000 persons lay in the Bagh either dead or wounded. Many of the wounded died during the night on the account of heavy bleeding. The Punjab government justified Dyer's action by raising the bogey of the frontier and the existence of a conspiracy. But the Intelligence Bureau of the Government of India found no traces of organized conspiracy in the Punjab. The Punjab tragedy had a lasting impact on succeeding generations. Rabindranath Tagore renounced his knighthood as a measure of protest. Gandhiji returned the Kesari Hind medal given to his work during the Boer War. Then, on 14th October 1919, order issued by the Secretary of State of India, Edwin Montagu, the Government of India announced the formation of a committee of inquiry into the events of Punjab, which later more widely known as the Hunter Commission. So it was a genocide. The reason may be only because of the two conflicting views that I have been put forward about the responsibility for this Jallianwala Bagh tragedy. So far, one of the British imperialist and the other of Indian nationalist. The British government of India of the time and the people of like thinking contended that Dyer ordered firing at Bagh because of a mistaken conception. However, these views have been expressed by those who wanted to draw a curtain over the real cause, that is, the pursuance of the policy of imperialism followed by the Britishers in India. Although it was the entire imperial system which was behind the incident, yet they did not mind making Dyer a scapegoat in order to whitewash their sin. Had the people of Amritsar not taken a heroic stand against the awful might of the Britishers on that fateful day, India would not have gained freedom within a generation thereafter. The Jallianwala Bagh site is now a memorial of national importance. Now let's pay tribute to all those people who were killed mercilessly on that day. At last, I just want to say that गूंज रही थी चार दीवारी तब इनकलाब के नारों से सहम उठा जब पूरा भारत डायर के अत्याचारों से क्या बूढ़े क्या बच्चे क्या महिलाएं प्रस्तुत थी जब जलियांवाला बाग में लिखी खूनी कलम ने कहानी थी विद दिस थैंक यू
Thank you, Bhumi, for your nice speech. And you took around 7 to 8 minutes, so you are well before and on time. So absolutely, there was no problem. And I congratulate you on a very beautiful, very thoughtful presentation. Moving forward, now let us hear from Krishna Yadav, who is a 20 BEE 032 student at.
Have a glorious morning to one and all present here. This is Krishna Yadav. Want to highlight some points on the topic Jallianwala Bagh Massacre, a homicide or genocide. Mm. Whenever you think about 13 April 1919, what comes to your mind? Baisakhi, and with Baisakhi, the wounds that can never be healed. Jallianwala Bagh Massacre, the biggest massacre in Indian history. The day when thousands of innocent people were injured and 379 innocent were killed by British Army General Dyer, and his troops fired more than 1650 rounds on innocent people celebrating the festival of Baisakhi. He had his troop fire till her ammunition were exhausted. It was not an accidental attack, it was a well-planned attack. British troops blocked the only entrance and exit to the bar so that they can cause maximum damage. It was a genocide, I would say. So my some of points regarding this. On 10 April 1919, two nationalist leaders, Dr. Saifuddin Kishlev and Dr. Satyapal, were arrested by the British government in Punjab. Their arrest agitated the people of Punjab who protested to set their leaders free. Due to increasing unrest among the people, the government banned public meetings and requested the military to take up the charge of Amritsar. As a result, General Dyer was put in the charge. The government put a ban on public gathering and also dismisses the meeting scheduled to be held on April 13th, the day of Baisakhi. But the notice of the ban was not made public, hence a large number of Jallianwala Bagh to protest against the arrest of the leader. The peaceful gathering was attended by unarmed men, women, and innocent children. Suddenly, General Dyer, the British military in charge, entered the Bagh along with 150 troops and surrounded the gathering. Since the Bagh was enclosed by walls, all sides, and had only one narrow passage for both entry and exit, Dyer ordered his ammunition troops to close it and open fire at the peaceful and unarmed crowd till all the ammunition ran out. The firing lasted for 15 minutes and people had no way to escape. In the cold-blooded encounter, more than 1,000 people were massacred and over twice that number injured, including women, children. Many people jumped into a nearby well to escape the firing, and the skeletons of 120 of them were recovered later. The Maasai's attack shook not only Punjab but the entire national and became a turning point in the history of Indian struggle freedom. So, from this, we can conclude that it was a well planned genocide, not the homicide. Uh, for this well-planned genocide, some of the causes like World War First Rolex Act, which is known as the Black Act, as we know, and the growing community of Indians. So I want to highlight some little points on this regarding first World War First. Was the first underlying causes of the massacre. The people of Punjab had tremendous animosity of the British government since the beginning of World War First, mainly due to ruthless strife of British colonization of recruiting soldiers and compelling them to participate in the World War. In the Rowlatt Act of 1919, everyone well aware of the Black Act known as to. Secondly, the Central Legislative Council passed the Rowlatt Act in 1990. According to this repressive act, only people could be arrested on the basis of suspicion and no petition could be given. Yes, no petition could be filed against such arrest. This act was called Black Act and people all over the country opposed it. So from this, all Indians unite, and by the unity of government peoples, Gandhi ji called for countrywide hartal on March 30 and April 6 to protest against the Black Art Act, which received enormous backlash from Punjab. Both Hindu and Muslim collectively participate in the strike, and on April 9, celebration of Ram Navami festival further alarmed the British government to take quick action against the growing unity of Indians. The arrest of Saifuddin Kishlev and Dr. Satyapal were made by this. Therefore, two people leaders, as I mentioned earlier, Amritsar, Kishlev and Satyapal were arrested. This led to harsh and mass demonstration in Lahore, Kasur, Gujranwala and Amritsar. The police firing in Amritsar agitated the demonstrators and provoked them to commit violence. Next day, the city was handed over to Brigadier-General Dyer. As soon as Dyer took charge, he ordered arrest and banned public meeting and gathering. Effect of consequences on Jallianwala Bagh massacre. This massacre had been premeditated move with the aim to create fear and terror among the Indians. Yes, the main motive was to create fear and terror among Indians. Following the massacre, the inhabitants of Amritsar were tortured brutally. On the contrary, mass riots erupted in Punjab and government had to place five of districts under martial law. Eventually, an inquiry committee was set up. The disorder inquiry committee was as Hunter Committee. After its chairman, Lord Hunter, had Brigadier General Dyer guilty and took away thousands of lives. Dyer had no regret. Yes, Dyer had no regrets and declared with pride that he had done it to produce a moral effect on the people. He also stated that he had gone to the Bagh along with his troops with the deliberate intention of open firing to the crowd. After effect of massacre, uh, there were strike protests, violence all over the country, and attacks on government building. Several restrictions were imposed on Indians, and satyagrahis were martyred by the officers. They were made to crawl on the streets and do salam to sahibs, which is known as British officers. People were thrashed and villages were bombed. Around 99 years have passed since the fateful event cemented our hatred for the colonial empire, and till date, no representative of British had cared enough to apologize for the brutal act. The bullet marks are still on the walls of Park, remaining the visitors of atrocities that were forced upon the unarmed people and leaving him overwhelmed. So, as from this, we really conclude that this was the black day of our Indian history, and it was a genocide planned. And the conclusion comes from here: the Jallianwala massacre has a deep impact on the mind of people, and it was definitely be one of the cruelest acts done by the British Raj. This fortunate incident will always make us remember the sacrifices of thousands of people to achieve our independence. And as citizen of India, it is our moral responsibility to make our country proud. Jallianwala Bagh massacre turned to be major severe in the confine of British rule in the India. 13 April 1919. No one can forget the day and the pain of that day. I hope this is my view on that point. I hope you'll enjoy and like it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Krishna, for your presentation. It was really a nice one, and you have taken around 9 to 10 minutes. So that is also well in time. And the next speaker will be Ananya Sharma, who is 20 BEE 016.
Okay. As once said by great author Jack Schwartz, mass murder is an attempt to exterminate a people, not to alter their behavior. One such incident that took place was Jallianwala Bagh Massacre, the brutality of which sent shockwaves across India when there were administrative reforms and limited self-government. A very good morning to one and all present here. Today, I, Ananya Sharma, have got this wonderful opportunity to throw some light on the topic Jallianwala Bagh Massacre or homicide or genocide. The Jallianwala Bagh Massacre, also known as Amritsar Massacre, took place on 13 April 1919 when acting Brigadier-General Dyer ordered troops of the British Indian Army to fire their rifles into a crowd of unarmed Indian civilians, killing at least 379 people and injuring over 1,200. On 13 April 1919, Dyer, convinced a major insurrection could take place, banned all meetings. This notice was not widely disseminated, and many villagers gathered in the Bagh to celebrate the festival Baisakhi and peacefully protest the arrest and deportation of two national leaders, Satyapal and Saifuddin Kichu. Dyer and his troops entered the garden, blocking the main entrance behind them, took up position on the raised bank, and with no warning opened fire on the crowd for about 10 minutes, directing their bullets largely towards the few gates open through which people were trying to flee, until the ammunition supply was totally exhausted. Men, women, children, and old people were caught in this firing. The Hunter Commission report, published the following year by the government, criticized both Dyer personally and also government of Punjab for failing to compile a detailed casualty count. Responses polarized both the British and Indian people. The massacre caused the re-evaluation by the British Army of its military role against civilians to minimal force whenever possible. The army was retained and developed less violent tactics for crowd control. It resulted in a wrenching loss of faith of common people in British troops. It led to a great widespread anger against the British among the Indian populace, leading to non-cooperation movement in 1920 to 22. Some historians consider the episode a decisive step towards the end of British rule in India. The Jallianwala Bagh Massacre catalyzed the independence. The incident itself may have been overshadowed by the devastation caused by the partition, but the massacre still has deepening effects. Dyer was anything but remorseful of this savagery. He admitted that he could have dispersed them without firing, but that would have been derogatory to his dignity as defender of law and order. The massacre had been a calculated act, and Dyer declared that he had done it to produce moral effect on the people. Viceroy Lord Chelmsford was indicative of the government's attitude. He said that Dyer administered martial law reasonably and not tyrannously. Both Winston Churchill and former Prime Minister H. Asquith, however, openly condemned the attack. Churchill referring to it as unutterably monstrous, while Asquith quoted it as one of the worst, most dreadful outrages in the whole of our history. He was widely criticized at the House of Commons. He was sacked and sent to London. Genocide is not just a murderous madness, but it is more deeply a politics that promises a utopia beyond politics. But history cannot be rewritten, however much we may wish otherwise. It has its moments of sadness as well as gladness. We must learn from sadness and build on gladness. At last, I'd like for you to take a moment to remember all the innocent lives that were lost in this massacre. Thank you.
Thank you, Ananya. You took around 5 minutes for your presentation, which is also well in time. So absolutely there is no problem. Now we will move to our next participant. That is Sanya Gupta, who is 20 IBB 076.
A cold blooded genocide. This is probably the most simple and honest way of describing what happened at Jallianwala Bagh in Amritsar, Punjab on April 13, 1990. The ground stands witness to the inhumane atrocities of the British Empire. Good morning, everyone. Today I am going to speak on the topic Jallianwala Bagh Massacre, a homicide or genocide. In my conviction, it was without a doubt a genocide. 102 years ago, on this day, a tragedy unfolded. One that history claims as one of the bloodiest and darkest days of the Indian struggle for independence. In April 1919, the British government was at the pinnacle of its rule. Tension was brewing in the city of Amritsar, Punjab, amid riots and protests against the tyranny of the British and continuous retaliation by the British Raj. On 13th April 1919, Colonel Reginald Dyer received word of a protest meeting being organized at the Jallianwala Bagh. He led his troops and stormed into the Bagh, armed with rifles, where about 20,000 men, women, and children unarmed had gathered. Some in protest of the Rowlatt Act,
and others in celebration of the festival of Baisakhi. It was nearly completely enclosed by walls and had only one exit. Dyer and his soldiers arrived and sealed off the exit. Without warning, the troops opened fire on the crowd, reportedly shooting hundreds of rounds until they ran out of ammunition. It is not certain how many died in the bloodbath, but according to one official report, an estimated 379 people were killed and about 1,200 more were wounded. After they ceased firing, the troops immediately withdrew from the place, leaving behind the dead and wounded. Apart from the many deaths directly from the shooting, a number of people died of crushing in the stampedes at the narrow gates or by jumping into the solitary well on the compound to escape the shooting. A plaque placed at the site after independence states that 120 bodies were recovered from the well. The wounded could not be moved from where they had fallen as a curfew was declared, and more who had been injured then died during the night. This was a barbarous act of Jallianwala Bagh Massacre of 1990. The scale and nature of this act was so unprecedented that it shook the entire nation, provoking several intellectual figures condemning the act on Indians. General Dyer mercilessly killed the people, even though the martial law had yet not been imposed. This massacre paved the path of Indian nationalists to rally popular support and channel them towards the downfall of the oppressive British regime. Indians recognized the fact that idea of racism had been evolving further to acquire very destructive forms that undermined the liberty and rights of the people. The racial brutality of the government continued even after this massacre, where the homes of many revolutionaries were raided and people were terrorized with fear of the Britishers. This incident conveyed the cold and callous nature of the empire, which concealed with contempt and racial idea towards the Indians. This heinous act was widely praised, and General Dyer's action was blindly endorsed by the then governor of Punjab. Britain has a very bad experience in colonies of professing racial discrimination against the indigenous people of a colonized country and looking down upon their culture and differences. The partial trial of General Dyer, mere punishment for unleashing a genocide, killing hundreds of innocent people, seemed to be a blindfold for Indians, trying to convince them about the sensitiveness of the regime. This clearly exposed the naked reality of the racial attitude of the imperialistic regime. Although the empire strongly condemned his actions, they said their main motive was to strengthen the fear in the minds of Indians. This was the cruelest bloodshed after the mutiny, where the Britishers had alienated the Indians. The massacre was one of the prototypical examples of repressive punishments unleashed by the Britishers in black and Asian colonies with polarization of races intensified half century before 1990. The shooting was followed by the proclamation of martial law in Punjab that included public floggings and other humiliations. Indian outrage grew as the news of shooting and subsequent British actions spread throughout the subcontinent. The Bengali poet and Nobel laureate Rabindranath Tagore renounced the knighthood that he had received in 1915. Gandhi, who was initially hesitant to act, but he soon began organizing his first large scale and sustained non-violent protest campaign, the Non Cooperation Movement, which thrust him to prominence in the Indian nationalist struggle. The government of India ordered an investigation of the incident, the Hunter Commission, which in 1920 censored Dyer for his actions and ordered him to resign from the military. Reaction in Britain to the massacre was mixed, however. However, many condemned Dyer's actions, including Sir Winston Churchill, then Secretary of War, in a speech to the House of Commons in 1920. But the House of Lords praised Dyer and gave him a sword inscribed with the motto, Saviour of the Punjab. In addition, a large fund was raised by Dyer's sympathizers and presented to him. The Jallianwala Bagh massacre catalyzed the Indian independence movement and gave it a new shape and momentum. This is how 1650 bullets changed the course of India's freedom struggle. Thank you.
Thank you, Sanya, for your presentation as well. You
Yes.
have taken 7 minutes for your presentation, which is also well inside the time, and nobody has crossed the time. So it is customary in our university. What we usually do is that once the presentations, whether they are debates, speech, or any kind of declamation contest, we usually give a small summary of how the presentation went and how what are the things which we usually look for. So allow me to give some inputs about you people. First thing is that I must congratulate all of you, because all of you are first year students and have taken the initiative, as well as you have been, I should say, you have really been brave enough to come to this platform and present your views on Jallianwala Bagh Massacre. Now, this is very important because what I always feel is that participation is the most important thing. Whether we win or lose is something which can be attributed to a lot of other factors, whether we could perform, whether somebody was better performer, or there was some fumble in between, there were some technical problems in between, and stuff like that. But it is always important to perform, and it is always important to participate, because this is how we learn. Nobody is like a perfect person, or a perfect presenter, or a perfect, say, orator, who can just come impromptu and speak about anything on any given day. So they have to prepare, and they have to come, and they have to also perform. But participation is something which we should all go for. Now, so congratulations to all of you that you have participated. Now, there are certain general points about all of you. And since you people are first year students, and I hope that you people will also become the future of our university, and you people should learn from the experiences, as well as you people should get better and better with each and every passing day. So the first thing which I should say is that none of you have a very clear idea about what is the difference between homicide and genocide. So this is something which should have been very clearly stated in your presentations. So some of you have tried to touch upon the notion of genocide a little bit, but still, if you ask me, a proper speech should have been that first you should differentiate between what is homicide, how it is different from genocide, and then whether you consider Jallianwala Bagh massacre as a homicide or as a genocide. So that would have made the presentation or the speech far more comprehensible, and more, I will say, wiser, you know. And second thing is that most of you have resorted to a lot of history. Now, we do not want in speech history. We want your point of views, right? And how you are taking the point of view. Because a point of view is nothing like it is right or it is wrong. A point of view is a point of view. Then you have to come out with arguments in favor of what you are professing or what you are advocating, rather than and also the counter arguments of that. Because if you are stating a lot of history, if you are stating a lot of facts, it does not make much of sense. Does not matter how much true or false those facts are, it will actually not matter. The third thing is that many of you have fumbled in between. So both the pronunciation as well as fumbling in between a speech is not a proper thing. So the thing is that, look, we are not native English speakers. We learn English language as our second or third language. So given that, we will not be so damn fluent. Usually we are not very fluent, but then preparation helps. So what I will suggest to all of you is that you should prepare even more. Look, you always have a chance, even in offline presentations, to keep a paper with you. Because if you forget some line, or if you leave, or if you just fumble upon some punchline or something, or you want to state a figure, so you want that paper, right? But it is not admissible as well as permissible to read it completely from the paper. And all of you have read and read. So that is also something which I will say is not a very nice way of presenting, though you will always have the freedom to keep the paper, right? Most of the speech competitions will allow you to keep a paper or to jot down some points, but no speech competition will allow you to read it completely. But the things are picked up, you can always search those things. But the question is not that. The question is, even if you have picked up from somewhere, because you cannot make a material, right? Whatever is factual. You are not authoring it, but then you have to present it properly. Then none of you have presented arguments. Now, what are arguments? If I tell you, arguments precisely mean that you have a premise and then you have a conclusion out of it. Argumentation does not mean that you are debating with somebody or you are picking up a fight with somebody. Rather than you are arguing for your own point. That means you accept something and why you are accepting that thing, right? Because somebody can call Jallianwala Bagh Massacre as a homicide. Somebody will call it a genocide. Most of us in India will call it a genocide, but people from a different point of view can call it a homicide. Then why we call something as a homicide? What is the difference between homicide and genocide? How you are taking the data and making it an argument that you prove something as genocide is not something which came. These were certain points, and there were also certain points for some people. And let me tell you, this is a normal habit which we pick up from schools, you know? And that is that we will always like to end our presentations with some punchline. Um, and in order to add that thing up, what we do is that we add a punchline from another language. Like in India, usually if the presentation or the speech competition or the declamation or the debate competition is going on in English, you will like to put an English and Hindi, say a Hindi phrase or something, a poem. Similarly, something is going on in Hindi, then you will like to speak in between some English words. So these are certain kind of habits which we pick up from school, and it is the it is I will say responsibility of those teachers or those trainers who have taught you that this is not something which is acceptable. Does not matter how much it sounds well. Suppose if you are using another language, then you should come out with a translation of it. Like people can say that, okay, I want to use a Spanish verse or I want to use a Hindi verse over here. But then the English translation of that or the language in which the speech competition is or the debate competition is going on. So that translation should also come, or else it does not sound. But given all the things which I am saying, I am not deducting or deducing marks for any of the things which you people have done. Right? It is just my duty as the president of Board of Cultural Activities to tell you that how you can improve and how you can make your presentations better. So this is the thing. I can also declare the positions of you, but since it is all conducted under Azaadi Ka Amrut Mahotsav, so all the prizes and certificates will be distributed on 15th of August 2021. That will be the celebration of Independence Day, and we will be declaring those. I hope so that by that time everything will be normal and all of us will be in the university, and we hold a small cultural function on that day in the Matrika Auditorium. You might not be aware of that. The auditorium in our universities, the Matrika Auditorium, and it's quite a good central facility where we organize most of our cultural functions, and we will be declaring the positions and the prizes over there. But thank you so much, all of you, for participating, and that should be the spirit, that whenever we are holding, whether it is an online event or an offline event, you should try to participate as much as possible. In this way, we not only learn and improve ourselves, but also we bring a lot of laurels, not only for ourselves, but also for the institutions and organizations to which we belong. So, with these words, I thank you, all of you, again, for spending and taking out time and presenting on the Jallianwala Bagh Massacre. Thank you very much.